All right. Well, I'm not going to speak too loudly because this is my first time using the new microphone that I purchased, and I posted a short the other night explaining how it works. Generally speaking, the kind of podcast microphones or microphones that people use for music recording, you have to work through a computer, you plug it in, and if you've seen this setup, for example, if you watch video from, let's say, your favorite podcaster, you'll see a lot of controls and switches, and often there's an audio tech adjusting the gain and the feedback, and just to make sure that there's not too much other noise other than the person and people who are speaking. Well, the microphone that I have, that I just purchased, it actually works through your phone. And you know, I did a test yesterday, and the sound quality was pretty good. And because I often record, as you know, while I'm working out or on the go, I've been pretty busy lately, and you know, life happens. But I don't want to not record if I have ideas for episodes. I want to share, you know, my thoughts with you, and as always, hope to entertain, whether it's with an impression of you know, Stallone, or whatever it might be, Arnold. But I don't want to not record simply because I can't be in the studio using the microphone that I have there, which I certainly rather have the best quality sound for you possible. So this will be a little bit of a test to make sure that the microphone, because I know it's working correctly, but am I close enough to it? I guess at this point I'm about a foot away, and sometimes 4 to 6 inches, 8 inches, but then other times if you're too close to the microphone, you get a little bit of a muffled sensation. So we'll check this out for today. But I wanted to do the first episode in the new series that I teased at the very beginning of this year, which is the idea of 3 essential films. That's the concept of this series. And it's, you pick a name, or in this case me, and if you have somebody that you would like me to focus on, let me know in the comments. But a famous name, a legendary, iconic Hollywood name that is not a person who has become a star in the last at least 20 years. So nobody from Robert Pattinson forward, let's put it that way. So somebody who, let's say Gen Z, may know the name, but isn't necessarily that familiar with how did this person become this person. And if I have to watch 3 movies by this individual, what do you think they should be? And in this instance, it's me telling you what I think they should be, but it's the kind of exercise where you think to yourself, oh, well, I agree with this guy on one of the 3, but I actually think these 2 movies are better choices for what you're trying to do here. So again, it's all good. Criticism, constructive or otherwise, is welcomed. You know, the kind of back and forth of, okay, I get this, and that kind of, but I think your third pick, quite frankly, fucking sucks. All good. So, for the first entry in the series, I will start with my single favorite person who ever worked in the movie business, and that would be Clint Eastwood Jr., or Clint Eastwood, as most of you, even if you're really young, you at least know who he is. He just, you know, like a little old guy on social media. Maybe you've seen the kind of AI-generated life path showing him go from 95 years old as he is right now, back to when he was in the Navy, you know, when he was just a kid, and you say, man, is it the atmosphere? Is it the earth that ages us so much? Well, yeah, you know, as they say, no one gets out of here alive. But Clint Eastwood had an unusual path. He didn't set out to become an actor. He was doing other stuff. He was digging pools. He did serve in the United States military. And he got into the movie business, not so much accidentally, but he had a very distinctive look. And there are pictures of him from his, let's say, late high school, college era. And you can see that he doesn't look like everyone else from that era. And there are other actors where you could say the same thing, like a little bit later, 6, 7 years later. You look at pictures of Warren Beatty when he hit the scene. He doesn't look like anybody from that era. If you took 1960 Warren Beatty and moved him to 2026 and nobody knows who this guy is, you would say, he looks very modern. This looks like a person who is ahead of his time. So Clint Eastwood was a featured player. He got a gig working for Universal, and they had this, it seems so stupid, but they had this kind of a talent program where they were training young actors and actresses in how to move on screen, how to move on TV, and being literal, how do you hit your marks, how do you do that without drawing attention to yourself, hey, I'm looking for my mark, because you can watch movies and TV and you can for sure see actors trying to find their mark. And I want you to, if you watch the second Naked Gun movie, now Leslie Nielsen, another one of the all-timers, one of the funniest people to ever work in the movie business, there are a lot of moments in Naked Gun 2.5 where Leslie Nielsen appears to be looking down before addressing another actor. And watching that at age 17, what is he doing? Maybe it's just a thing that Leslie Nielsen does, like George Clooney with the head bob, years later on ER. That's just something. No, he was looking for his mark. That's why he's staring at the ground. Are you fucking kidding me? So Eastwood was in this talent program, learning how to be a movie star. But what are the odds, really? And they would put him in little bit parts in various movies. He did a movie with John Agar, Tarantula, where he plays the leader of a bombing squadron to try to kill the giant tarantula. It was one of those goofy Burt Gordon-style science fiction films from the 50s, where you have a tiny little spider, and they make it seem like it's the size of the Empire State Building. So that didn't work out for Clint. He made a series of movies, even made a film with Rock Hudson where he played Rock's lab assistant, and he had a kind of now famous guest shot on the old Brett Maverick TV show with somebody who became a good friend of his in later years. They even worked together on Space Cowboys, James Garner. And it was the TV show Rawhide that got Clint his big break. And that's how he was able to, because that show was a significant hit, his co-star Eric Fleming, this is what he's most known for, the TV show Rawhide. But Clint just looked like a guy who could have made it in the Old West. He didn't look like anybody else in 1950, but he also didn't really look like anybody else at any other time. He just was a very distinctive looking individual. And he had the right gaze, and there was something with that squint, the Clint Eastwood squint and the scowl, he already had it in spades. So the first movie of his that I would say is a must-see is not the movie that made him a movie star, at least at a modest level, which was the first of the so-called Dollars trilogy, the films he made with the great Sergio Leone, Quentin Tarantino's single favorite filmmaker, just to give you an idea of how much of a boss Sergio Leone is and was. Not a Fistful of Dollars, that's the first of the Dollars trilogy, or A Few Dollars More. But the third, the capper of the trilogy, the Dollars trilogy, where Clint plays, I guess you could say it's the same character, but we never get the guy's name, and he is known in film history, in lore, as the man with no name. What Clint Eastwood, who was about 35 or 36 at the time, what he does in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, the film is nearly 3 hours long, he has not that much dialogue. And this is something that Clint even joked about at the Oscars in 1971 or 72, where John Wayne was supposed to do the opening monologue, and the dude got stuck in traffic. It's so fucking lame, but he actually got stuck in traffic, and a couple of the organizers went up to Clint, who was going to present an award later in the show. Can you just run on stage and make a couple of jokes, because the Duke is running late and we don't know what the fuck to do? So Clint went on stage at the Oscars. He's already a big star. Dirty Harry had come out. And he goes, I don't know why they asked me to come up here and talk to you. I haven't had but 3 lines in my last dozen movies. And the gallery is cracking up, and it showed that he had it in him to be funny. He just typically played characters who were the opposite of a barrel of laughs. So The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. He holds his own throughout this almost Civil War epic kind of a movie. 3 men of varying degrees of kind of thuggery in Clint's Good, in Eli Wallach's Ugly, and the great Lee Van Cleef is the bad. But you could argue they're all kind of bad, but they all, except maybe Lee Van Cleef's character, they have kind of redeeming qualities. But that is a film that shows, even in his 30s, in his middle 30s, Clint Eastwood could hold a close-up as well as anyone you're ever going to see in a motion picture. So the film climaxes with this crazy Mexican standoff, which Quentin Tarantino reappropriated in Reservoir Dogs. The finale of that movie is one of the first moments of Quentin Tarantino paying tribute to his filmmaking idol, who I don't believe he ever met. He couldn't have. Leone passed in the late 1980s, and Quentin didn't really kind of get the inroad into the business until about 1990 with his Reservoir Dogs screenplay, which, cliche though this may be, everyone who read it said, who the fuck is this genius? Who the fuck is this kid? That's how Quentin got his start. But The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly shows how Clint Eastwood, how did he become not just a star, but a big star? And The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly was an enormous box office, a bigger hit than the first two in the Dollars trilogy, Fistful of Dollars, for a few dollars more. And it got him different kind of roles other than just playing the man with no name. So the second film that I would recommend young people, I mean, it doesn't have to be young people, but I just imagine millennials and Gen Z who only know the older era guys, and I'll say even Tom Hanks, and older, Travolta, only know them as old. And when you, for example, you see Robert De Niro in Killers of the Flower Moon or some of his more recent roles, and he's not coming across like a doddering old man, but he's older. He's 80 or close to 80. No, he's 80. I think he might be 81 now. But then you flash back and you look at De Niro in Taxi Driver, and you can't believe what you're looking at. And to a lesser extent, if you don't know how, for example, Christian Bale, how did Christian Bale become Christian Bale? Flash all the way back to Empire of the Sun and say, holy fuck, that's him. And then you say, okay, that's how he became, that was his first inroads, and how he made his inroads into the movie business. He was a child star. Holy crap. But Dirty Harry is the film that made Clint Eastwood a superstar. And it's always interesting to look back on that one movie that someone had that put them over the top. And in many cases, it's not even so much putting them over the top, but getting them to the A-list. Clint Eastwood was already on the A-list, but Dirty Harry made him like world box office #1. And it is another film where his very particular screen persona, it's difficult to imagine that movie working. It would work with other actors, but it's impossible to imagine it working anywhere near as well, because he had the right look and he had the right presentation and personality to play that particular character. And originally it was going to be Frank Sinatra, which is complete ridicularity, and thank goodness old Blue Eyes bowed out. And then there was an idea maybe John Wayne, but John Wayne and Clint Eastwood had a kind of weird, it was more that Wayne had a problem with Clint's films. John Wayne was a guy who almost didn't realize the movies he was making they weren't telling people like me anything like what he thought. John Wayne thought that he was making old-fashioned westerns about conquering the West, and I hate to say putting down those engines, but that's how he saw it. That's not what the second half of John Wayne's career. You watch the movie Red River? That's not a traditional Western. He thought that was a traditional Western. What the fuck, dude? What are you saying? And he thought The Searchers was also... Man, The Searchers is almost as anti-Western as Clint Eastwood's Unforgiven, which was 35 years after The Searchers. But John Wayne supposedly had the Dirty Harry property, or it was discussed, and he said, I'm too old for this. Little Danny Glover, I'm too old for this shit. Why don't you give it to Clint? I think he could do a good job. And that's what ended up happening. But there are those films where an actor is the perfect age, has the perfect kind of comportment, and the story suits the screen persona. Because Clint Eastwood was not necessarily known for big on-screen blow-ups, in the manner of De Niro screaming about going to lunch in Copland, or, you had a chance, we could have done something, and you blew it! You blew it. Clint didn't do that much, but the slow burn, and you're wondering when Mount Vesuvius is going to erupt. And Dirty Harry is a very tightly controlled Clint Eastwood performance, except there are a couple of moments where you see the rage, you see the frustration, but since he is a police officer, he's trying to do his job correctly. But they don't call him Dirty Harry for nothing. Usually it's just because he keeps getting the worst possible assignments. 15 years later, his buddy Stallone, that plays a guy in the zombie squad in Cobra, got even worse. And that guy is even dirtier than Dirty Harry. Marion Cobretti, one of the great names in the history of cinema, Stallone's character. But Dirty Harry shows Clint Eastwood was not only a guy who could play tough, who could look tough, but somebody who could deliver his lines and who could be the eyes of the audience and be in a film where with a different actor, we wouldn't like Harry Callahan at all. And it's not that Clint Eastwood in that era was such a warm and welcoming actor, but he reads his lines in such a way, and his face, he has a very expressive face. We feel his anger. Whether we agree with the steps he takes, we get this guy. We understand why he is the way that he is. And there is the one moment in the film where we realize just how much of a loner this guy is. This guy was married young, we think, because Clint's playing his own age. Harry Callahan's probably around 40, because there are some movies where Clint is clearly playing older, playing younger. Heartbreak Ridge, he's playing older, 15 years later. But we realize that Harry Callahan had been married and his wife has died tragically. And it's not that it excuses all of his kind of law-breaking, crime-fighting methods, but we understand this guy doesn't have anything. And the more you think about the fact of a 40-year-old man, with obviously has no criminal record as the film opens, this is a guy whose job is to try to uphold the law. Societal changes, all of this kind of stuff plays differently in 2026. There are people, when a judge is introduced as being from Berkeley, audiences were howling at that. Doesn't mean anything now. If I say, this judge, teaches at Berkeley, are you really going to have a reaction to that just hearing the word Berkeley? It meant something different then. But what Clint Eastwood does in Dirty Harry is he just gives us enough of a window into the soul of this very sad and very unfortunate young man who is acting like he doesn't care. It's not that he has a death wish, but he's taking risks that he really doesn't have to. And part of it is, what does he really have to live for? Like Mel Gibson's Martin Riggs, again, 15, 16 years later, the job, doing the job. And he tries to do his job to the best of his ability. And he is physically very capable. He is fearless. He's not trying to get himself killed. He is not suicidal. But he takes a lot of risks that I don't believe a man who is still a husband and potentially one day a father, I don't think he's taking those risks. I think he's being more cautious. I think, maybe I could wait for a little bit of backup here. That's probably protocol, and I don't think anybody's going to think I'm a wuss if give me 5 minutes, just wait for the cavalry to arrive. He even points that out in the famous bank robbery sequence where he's trying to have lunch. He's eating a hot dog, and he even says, I hope now they'll just wait for the cavalry to arrive. It's not his process to just consistently go out into people shooting rifles and guns at him, and and handguns at him, and it's just him. You know what? No, thank you. I'm all set here. But the circumstances of the story and the Dirty Harry franchise as a whole, he just keeps getting into these situations which usually he does not create or seek out. In Dirty Harry, he has a couple of moments where he does court disaster, where he does seek it out, because he hits his breaking point. And it's just really one of the best performances of his career. A great movie, which, I won't spoil it if you haven't seen it. It is an essential film of the 70s in and of itself, Dirty Harry, because the political and philosophical arguments in that movie by various characters, whether they're spelling out to the audience what they think, or whether you say, no, wait a minute, okay, so technically Callahan made a mistake, but could he have avoided the mistake? That's the bigger question here. Did he have a choice, or was he really in a situation where no matter what he did, he was going to be wrong? And it's a sort of Faustian bargain. If this character is going to die no matter what you do, well, what difference does it make if you don't follow protocol? Fuck that guy, this sort of thing. So, Dirty Harry is a movie where on the surface, if you just look at the surface, it seems like a pretty conventional story of cops and robbers, or in this case, cop and serial killer, and, does the good guy win? But Dirty Harry makes us ponder what price victory And does Harry Callahan actually win? It really depends how you look at it. How do you define winning? How do you define a conventional happy ending? What does it mean to you? I don't know. But Dirty Harry leaves you with as many questions as answers, and it's not what you're expecting, especially in a film that seems to slam the door shut at the end. It slams the door shut narratively, but creatively and artistically, you have almost as many questions at the end of Dirty Harry as you do at the end of another film which was released a couple of days after in Stanley Kubrick's A Clockwork Orange, where that's a film with even more just throwing all kinds of stuff at you, where you almost feel like you're under attack, not from the lead character in that movie, but from the number of different ideas colliding against one another, and what the fuck am I watching here? So, the good, the bad, and the ugly, to understand why did Clint Eastwood become Clint Eastwood, to understand the screen persona, Dirty Harry. And the third movie, I'm not going to choose the obvious. The obvious answer would be Unforgiven, because it was Clint's last Western movie as star, producer, director, and he won all the hardware. But I feel like the film that I would want a younger person to see, to kind of cement, why did this guy become this guy? Just as an actor in this context, In the Line of Fire, the film which was Clint's follow-up to Unforgiven, which he only got the role because buzz had begun building in the first part of 1992, that Unforgiven, which was not due to release until late in that summer. The advance word was that this was the best film of the year, and that Clint Eastwood, whose career had slipped in his late 50s, early 60s, Clint's about to make the comeback that nobody saw coming, and you better get him for other projects like right now, because he's going to blow up again. He's going right back to the proverbial A-list, and he's going to start headlining movies, so you have a chance to get him, fucking lock him up, so to speak. So In the Line of Fire has Clint, who is, again, presumably playing very close to his real age. He was 62 during production. He plays a Secret Service agent. And bear in mind, Clint Eastwood had already been a major star in movies for 3 decades. 3 decades. At the time In the Line of Fire was produced, and it was released in July of 1993. The summer of 93, an incredible summer. Jurassic Park, The Fugitive, Stallone with Cliffhanger, just a tremendous summer. Tom Cruise in The Firm was also an enormous hit. In the Line of Fire, dollar for dollar, is probably the biggest box office hit of Clint's career, certainly up to that point. It almost grossed $200 million. Again, 30-some years ago. That would be a nice gross for today. But Clint plays a Secret Service agent in the Line of Fire. And he is not a washout. He is not, again, he's not suicidal, but he is somebody who has not made as much of his life as he probably should have. Marriage, and his wife, is now his ex-wife, had left him. And as a very young man, he was a rookie agent with the U.S. Secret Service on presidential detail. And the kind of narrative cheat of the story is that Clint Eastwood's Frank Horrigan was this rookie agent on presidential detail the day that JFK was assassinated. And Frank Horrigan was the agent closest to JFK and did not react when the first shot rang out. And in theory, if he had jumped from where he was positioned, again, the movie is playing fast and loose with the real history, positing that this guy, this Frank Horrigan, he had a path where he could have gotten to Kennedy and probably saved his life, but he probably gets his head split open by gunfire and he dies at age 22 or however old he would have been. Now it's 30 years later and he is haunted by the fact that he let down the country. He let down JFK. Somebody were led to believe that they were, on good terms, that he and JFK, in the world of this film, he was JFK's favorite agent. And fucked up, failed. And the movie is about a presidential potential assassin played magnificently by John Malkovich. And it still pisses me off that Malkovich didn't win the supporting actor Oscar. And I'm sorry, because I love Tommy Lee Jones in The Fugitive, again, same summer. That is a phenomenal performance. But John Malkovich is Mitch Leary. That's top 5 greatest villains in movie history. Fucking hill. I'll go down on that hill. Malkovich is magnificent. So he decides, in his really not very favorable way, a really nasty way, he's going to resurrect Frank Horrigan. Yeah, Frank Harrigan's going to end up dying, but I'm going to give this guy an opportunity to redeem his pathetic, shitty life. Because he didn't protect the first president, I'm going to take a crack at the current guy, and he's going to have a chance to stop. He won't be able to, but at least I'm going to give the guy an opportunity at redemption. And the way Clint plays Frank Harrigan, and if you were to do a comparison, the man with no name as presented in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Harry Callahan, and Frank Harrigan, the Clint Eastwood of In the Line of Fire, is still potent, still resourceful, still a guy you would not want to piss off. He could take care of himself, he has certain fighting skills, like he's not just a random guy in his early 60s. But this is not the man with no name, this is not Harry Callahan even. This is a guy who shouldn't be doing this line of work at this point. He should not be on presidential detail running beside a motorcade. He's too old for this shit now. This should not be his life. He should be doing desk work, honestly. And the idea of Clint Eastwood, 3 decades a star. There's an incredible moment. It's the single best moment of acting in Clint's career. This and the "It's a hell of a thing killing a man" monologue in Unforgiven. To me, the 2 best moments, my favorite person to ever work in the movie business. But Clint has a moment in this film with his co-star, just a resplendent Rene Russo, who is so great but she's probably the best agent on presidential detail. She's phenomenal. And there's a romance between them that it works. It shouldn't work, but it does work because the 2 of them had fantastic chemistry. And Renee just looks like she's having a great time making this movie and could not have been an easy shoot. But there's a moment in the film where the U.S. Secret Service is mobilizing for the following day, where the president is coming in. The election is coming up and he's down the poll, whatever the mechanics of that. And they know that Mitch Leary is going to make he's going to make a try the next day. And the entire Secret Service, they're all ready, they've got extra agents, but we as the audience know, and Clint Eastwood's Frank Harrigan know, it's going to come down to me. You guys don't have any conception of just how fucking devious and brilliant this guy is. You keep thinking I'm exaggerating. You're not going to be able to stop him. It's either going to be me or nobody. So, Clint finally discusses what happened that terrible day, November 22nd, 1963, when he did not act. And it's not an exaggeration to say that this has destroyed his life. And the way that he even says the phrase, "You're looking at a living legend." Clint Eastwood is saying a line in character, "You're looking at a living legend." And we know he's also talking to the audience. He already was a living legend in Hollywood, in the movie business. He had been Warner Brothers' biggest producer of money as far as box office hits for more than 2 decades, just about 25 years at that point. Even if there had been a slip in the late 80s, early 90s, had a lot of good movies like White Hunter, Black Heart that just didn't make any money. Bird with Forrest Whitaker just didn't make any money. And when Clint starts to cry in that scene, it was not in the script. It's just an unbelievable moment. Like this is cinema alpha male #1, and he's crying on screen. And I remember seeing the movie in theaters. There was a guy behind me. He flipped the fuck out because Clint Eastwood started crying. Almost like he had to give back his man card, whatever that is. He didn't say that. This is what I'm thinking, looking back on it now. But to show that even legends like Clint Eastwood aren't indestructible forever. Can still get the job done, but they're a little bit slower. The danger feels more real. It's like in the 4th Indiana Jones film, which I don't like, when Harrison Ford's Indiana Jones says, "It's not the years, it's the mileage." You know, this isn't going to be easy. Not as easy as it used to be. Because the reality is, I think that Harry Callahan would be more equipped to handle Mitch Leary than Frank Harrigan, but that's kind of the point. This guy is older, but he's not obsolete. And In the Line of Fire is top 10 greatest thrillers I've ever seen. And if you go on Rotten Tomatoes, the film is like 97 or 98%. So it isn't just me. Everybody, I don't know a single person who has seen In the Line of Fire that doesn't say, "Wow, that's one of the best thrillers I've ever seen." So the 3 essentials for Clinton Eastwood Jr., his birth name, but the 3 essential films to understand how and why Clint Eastwood became Clint Eastwood. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Dirty Harry, and In the Line of Fire. I hope you've enjoyed the first episode in the series of the 3 essentials. I think I'm going to officially call it that, the 3 essentials. And won't have a conventional wrap-up. I will see you all again real soon. Here's to having a great Thursday. Peace.